Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world you probably didn't know existed. The year is 536 and the morning sky looks wrong. It's not just cloudy, it's not just overcast. It's as if the sun itself forgot how to rise. There's a dim, coppery hue where daylight should be. And the air, it's got a bite, like late autumn, except you're smack in the middle of what should be spring. The birds aren't singing. People aren't talking. Just quiet, like the earth is holding its breath. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Are you surviving 536 in Tokyo, Buenos Aires, Saskatoon? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up hungry, again. You've been waking up that way a lot lately. At first, it was just a little less bread at breakfast, a little more stretch in the stew. But now your ribs are whispering to your spine, and your stomach has learned how to growl in Latin. It's not just you. The whole village feels thinner, quieter, stretched like hide, left too long in the sun. Except there is no sun. You step outside and stare at a sky that looks like dirty dishwater. It's been this way for weeks, maybe months. Time's gotten slippery. Mornings blend into evenings, without the usual golden cues. The sun shows up as a pale ghost, more suggestion than star. Shadows are soft, diffuse, and weirdly unsettling. You've started dreaming in grayscale. At first, folks said it was an eclipse. Then they said it was divine punishment. Then, once the ash started falling like misty black snow, they stopped saying much at all. That ash is everywhere now. In your hair, in your teeth, in the folds of your tunic. You can't scrub it off because water's too precious to waste. And besides, it never really leaves. Every breath tastes faintly of charcoal and crushed rock. And every day, someone else disappears. Some vanish into the woods, heading for rumored warmth or food or hope. Some just sit down and stop moving. You saw a neighbor do that yesterday. Just parked himself on a stone, stared into the soupy sky, and didn't blink for hours. You're pretty sure he's still there. Mainstream historians agree. In 536 CE, something catastrophic happened to the climate. Multiple ancient sources, from the Roman historian Procopius to Chinese court records, report a mysterious year without sun. Crops failed, temperatures dropped. Something, somewhere, went very, very wrong. But where? You hike up the hill behind the village to get a better look. The world stretches out in smoky layers. Fields gone fallow. Animals huddled under sheds. Not a single bird in the sky. Even the crows seem to know better. And in the distance, the mountains look like they're exhaling. That's not fog. That's more ash, rolling in like a tired tide. They say it started with a bang. Not here, of course. No thunder, no shaking. But somewhere far off, maybe in the far north. Iceland? Alaska? Historians still argue whether it was one supervolcano or a pair of massive eruptions that set the skies on fire. Whatever it was, it flung sulfur and dust straight into the stratosphere, high enough to wrap the earth in a choking veil. No one told you this, though. You're just a farmer, a hungry one. Down in the village square, people have started huddling around the blacksmith's cold forge. Not for heat. There's no wood to spare, but just to feel close, to be near someone breathing. You hear snippets of prayers, muttered in Latin, Greek, some dialect you don't recognize. You hear arguments too. Someone blames the Jews, someone else blames witches. And a child whispers that the moon is sick. That part might be true. You saw the moon last night. It looked bruised. The town priest insists the darkness is a trial. He's taken to wearing sackcloth and ashes, which is redundant since ash is already falling on everything. He says, the Lord is testing your resolve. He also says you should fast for purity. That suggestion gets a few hollow laughs. Here's a weird but true tidbit. Some people in 536 reportedly tried to eat tree bark. Birch was a favorite. Others made flour from ferns. There's even a record of ground-up animal bones being used in bread. Tasty, right? Gourmet apocalypse. You walk past a cart with a half-rotten sheep carcass in it. No one's touching it. Not because they're squeamish, but because it's been dead too long. And even desperation has limits. You check your neighbor's garden. Nothing but limp stems and mildew. It's been 6 harvests since anything grew properly. The soil's confused, too cold, too dry, too cursed. You remember your grandmother telling you how the earth needs sun, like people need laughter. Neither's been around much lately. The dogs have stopped barking. That's probably the worst part. Not that there are many left. Most have been eaten or run off into the hills. But the few that remain just sit in corners, staring at nothing. One used to bark every time someone approached the village gate. Not anymore. Now he just whines softly, like he knows something's coming. And you wait for warmth, for food, for a sign. You dream of color, rich greens, golds, reds. You remember what strawberries taste like, what it felt like to sweat. You miss sweating. The elders say they've never seen a sky like this. Not even in winter. It's July now, or maybe August, and you're wearing every layer you own. People are burning dung and peat just to stay warm. Everything smells like fire and fear. The weird thing, there are no stars at night, not even a flicker. The dark is just absolute, like the heavens turned off. You feel that in your bones. A kind of cosmic silence, like the world's been put on pause, and still you survive. You ration your lentils. You scrape moss off the well wall. You steal a turnip from a sick man's garden and hate yourself for it. One day, a traveler arrives, cloaked, coughing, eyes wild. He says the darkness stretches across the whole continent. He says in Byzantium, the emperor has called for national prayer. He says ships are floating into harbors unmanned. Ghost ships. He says in Ireland, the snow fell in August. You don't believe him. Then you realize you haven't seen a butterfly in months. That's when it hits you. The world isn't just sick. It's changing. Maybe forever. Some nights, you dream of fire. Volcanoes towering over oceans, their bellies glowing. You dream of rivers boiling, and mountains breaking. You wake up with your mouth full of ash. Eventually, you stop counting days. What's the point? Time doesn't behave anymore. It loops and blurs, but you mark your survival. Every morning you're still here is a small, stubborn miracle. You don't know if this is the end of the world, but it's definitely the end of the one you knew. And somewhere, just out of reach, the ash keeps falling. You don't remember when the dreams began. Exactly. One night, you're tossing on a straw mat, stomach gnawing itself raw. And the next, you're dreaming of boiling skies, of birds falling in mid-flight, of giants made of soot stalking through the haze. It's not just you. Everyone's been talking about it, quietly, in huddles by firelight, with that "don't wake the curse" whisper in their voice. At first, you wrote it off as hunger-induced nonsense. But then you started noticing the patterns. People dreaming the same twisted images. Ash turned to blood in water. Stars that fell from the sky and burst into flame. The kind of dreams that make you wake up already tired, like your soul's been traveling while your body just shivered in place. One old woman said she dreamed of wolves with human eyes. Another swears she saw the sun shatter like pottery. And a boy, too young to speak clearly, drew a volcano in the dirt with alarming precision. No one had told him about volcanoes. They're calling it Omen sleep now. As if dreams have become a kind of communication or warning. The priest says it's divine revelation. The healer says it's poison in the air. One of the blacksmith's apprentices says it's mushrooms. Honestly, at this point, nobody's ruling anything out. But dreams or not, the ash keeps falling. You've started keeping a rag over your mouth during the day. It doesn't help much, but it's better than breathing in soot, like it's soup. You've also learned a neat little trick. If you rub a candle with pig fat, it'll burn longer, even in this damp cold. You're not proud of how you found that out. Poor pig. Historians agree this wasn't an isolated hallucination. Written records from 536 through 540 repeatedly mention terrifying omens, eclipses, phantom suns, stars behaving strangely, and nightmarish dreams recorded by monks, tribal elders, and even imperial scribes. People across entire continents were convinced the world was unraveling at the seams. And really, who could blame them? It's not just the ash, it's the silence. You walk through fields where nothing stirs. No bees, no flies, no birds. Nature's been muted. Even the trees look unsure of themselves, their leaves stunted and curled inward, like hands in prayer. One morning, you spot a cloud on the horizon, huge, dark, and silent. Not thundercloud dark, something denser. You squint, holding a hand over your eyes, and realize it's another wave of ash, rolling in like fog, smothering what little light remains. When it hits, it smells like burned hair and copper. You gag. Afterward, your garden turns gray. Even the weeds give up. You hear that in other villages, people are going blind. Not permanently, but their eyes swell shut from exposure. The ash cakes into the eyelids, burrows under fingernails, settles into beds. There are rumors that it carries sickness, not just choking and coughing, but something worse. a deep lung rot that doesn't go away. You think you've caught it. Or maybe it's just your body finally running on empty. You try to sleep that night but can't. The dreams have changed. Now you see not just disaster, but faces, pale and wide-eyed, familiar and not. People who shouldn't be in your memory, calling your name. One of them tells you the sun is trapped behind a curtain. Another says the earth's blood is boiling beneath your feet. You wake up sweating, despite the chill, clawing at your throat. You're not alone. Half the village had the same dream. The other half look at you like you've been touched. You wander to the river. It's lower than it should be. Sluggish. The water's gone tea brown, thick with silt. You scoop a handful and taste iron. Upstream, someone's been dumping animal carcasses. You turn back, stomach curling. That night, someone starts screaming. A child. She's been dreaming of her father, dead a year now. Standing in the doorway, skin cracking like dried clay. She says he told her to leave, that the sky is lying. You're beginning to believe her. In the morning, a traveler comes limping into town. Again, this one wears Roman sandals, but no insignia, no banner. He says he was with a merchant caravan when the ash storm hit. 2 camels suffocated on the spot. One man went mad, began clawing at his own face. They left him behind. You ask where he came from. He points east. He says the sun rose blood red for 3 days straight, then didn't rise at all for another 5. He says temples are burning in Antioch, and monks are blaming the smoke for burning the heavens. He says the emperor is calling it divine punishment, and yet the court astrologers, normally cool and detached, are terrified. Something broke, he whispers. Up there. He gestures to the sixth sky. Here's the quirky detail. In some places, people believed the sun had been eaten, not metaphorically, literally devoured by a cosmic serpent or dragon. In Scandinavia, myths of the Wolfenrir swallowing the sun gained renewed attention. In China, historians noted a yellow fog and a dim sun for over a year. Some thought it was a ghostly eclipse that just wouldn't end. You return home and place stones in a ring outside your door. Not for protection, just to give yourself something tangible to do. A boundary. You need structure, even if it's fake. Someone in the village builds a fire at dawn, despite the wood shortage. They throw herbs and bones into it, muttering something in a language you don't know. The flames flicker green for a moment, and the air stinks of sulfur. The priest doesn't like it. He scolds them, but nobody listens anymore. The old gods are creeping back, and frankly, they feel more responsive than the new ones. That night, you hear wolves for the first time in weeks. Real ones. Distant howls treading through the darkness. Somehow, it's comforting. You decide to write something. Just a few words scratched onto a wooden tablet. You don't know why. Maybe to remember who you were before the sky turned to ink. Maybe for someone else to find when you're gone. You write, the sun was taken. The dreams began. I remain. As you set it on your windowsill, Something catches your eye. A crack in the cloud cover. Just a sliver. And behind it, no, it couldn't be. But yes, for a heartbeat, you see real light. Not warmth. Not yet. But light. Then the curtain closes. You're not sure if it was a sign or a trick. But you go to bed anyway. Not because you're hopeful. Just because you're exhausted. And when you dream, this time, there are no monsters. Just silence. You wake up to silence. Not the eerie, apocalyptic hush you've gotten used to, but something different. A fragile kind of stillness. Like the world's holding its breath, but this time with a tinge of waiting. Not just dying. Then your stomach reminds you, loudly, that it's been days since anything remotely satisfying crossed your lips. You're used to it by now. Hunger has moved in, put its muddy boots on your table, and doesn't look like it's leaving. You've even named the gnawing in your belly. You call it Old Gray. Because, like the sky, it just hangs around and gets darker every day. And you're not alone. Everyone's starving. The village granary? Long empty. The chickens? Gone. Either eaten or run off. The goats? Too precious to slaughter now. People are boiling leather shoes, scraping moss off trees. Someone tried roasting clay the other day. For the minerals, they said. You just watch them chew and weep and chew again. Welcome to the fog famine. It doesn't happen all at once. The collapse. Famine has a choreography. First, the easy food disappears. Grains, root vegetables, dried meat. Then the wild things, berries, game, fish, vanish. Then desperation kicks in. Trade becomes theft. Neighbors become rivals. People start to die. Not from violence, but from choices made 6 months ago. Like planting in soil that never warmed. Historical records confirm that 536 triggered one of the worst multi-year famines in human history. The Byzantine historian Procopius called it a time when the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon. Irish annals speak of failed harvests and famine. In China, reports mention yellow dust blocking out the sun and locusts devouring what little survived. Famine didn't just hit, it parked itself and unpacked its bags. You try to help where you can. You share a half-mushy onion with a boy whose cheeks are sinking inward. You swap a rusted knife for a spoonful of sour goat milk. You even learn how to identify edible weeds, the bitter ones, the ones that make your tongue itch. One night, you boil bark, pine to be exact, scrape off the outer layer, roast the inner bits, mash it into paste. It tastes like sadness and campfire. You eat it anyway. Someone suggests eating the dogs. The suggestion hangs in the air like a bad smell. No one says yes, but no one says no either. Later that week, the smallest dog in the village goes missing. You pretend not to notice, but it's not just food that's vanishing. It's people. The old go first. They simply stop. Stop eating. Stop moving. Stop being. You wrap them in rough linen and bury them shallow, because no one has the strength to dig deep. The ground's too hard anyway. Too cold, even in what should be summer. Then the young start to fade. Sickness, mostly. Malnutrition doesn't just kill by starvation. It opens the door for every passing fever, every infected scratch, every invisible, hungry thing that's been waiting in the shadows. And all the while, the fog doesn't lift. You ask an elder what this fog even is. They shrug and call it the breath of punishment. You ask the healer. They say it's ash and moisture clinging together, wrapping the land in a damp, choking blanket. You ask the priest, who now wears his robes inside out and chants in Greek. He just weeps. The fog creeps into everything. Into your clothes, your lungs, your thoughts. You start to feel like your mind is wrapped in it too. Slow, heavy, dim. People begin building signal fires on the hills. Not to call for help. There's no one out there to help. But just to be seen. To remind anyone still out there that you exist. That you're still here. Just barely. Here's a weird historical tidbit. Some communities began hanging reflective objects, polished metal plates, shards of obsidian, in trees to attract the sun, like a cosmic fishing lure. Others tried beating drums at dawn to wake the sky. Did it work? Probably not. But it gave people something to do besides starve. One day, a woman walks into the village from the west. She's barefoot, covered in soot, and carrying a bundle wrapped in wool. She doesn't speak. She just walks straight to the center of town, opens her bundle, and reveals bread. Not much. 2 small, dense loaves. Flat, dark. She sets them on a stone and walks away. No one touches them for a while. Is it a trap? A test? A sign? Eventually, someone breaks off a corner. Then another. Then it's gone. Later, you find the woman sitting under a tree, eyes closed, lips blue. She's dead. You bury her under the same tree, carefully. You plant the seed of an apple beside her. No one says it'll grow, but it feels right. Meanwhile, the rats are thriving. Of course they are. They've adapted, feasting on what you've left behind. They're faster, fatter, braver. One even bites a child. That child gets a fever. Then the fever spreads. The healer says it's nothing new. Just what happens when you're starving. Immune systems crumble. The body turns on itself. The priest says it's punishment. You say nothing. You just keep your distance. Historians still argue whether the famine of 536 to 540 was made worse by a global pandemic, or whether disease simply followed naturally from starvation. Some believe there were waves of illness, perhaps dysentery, respiratory infections, or early strains of something nastier, circulating in weakened populations. But no matter the cause, the result was the same. Death, and lots of it. You've lost weight. Your clothes hang off your bones. Your joints ache in strange places. But you keep going because there's something stubborn in you. A tiny ember, hidden deep. You keep walking, keep checking your pitiful garden. Keep boiling moss. Because what else is there? Some nights, the dreams return. This time, the faces are familiar. Your grandmother, smiling through cracked lips. A friend who vanished last winter, waving from a sunlit meadow. A version of yourself, healthy, laughing, warm. You don't trust those dreams, but they help. Then one morning something changes. You step outside and the air smells different. Still damp, still cold, but fresher somehow. The fog's thinner. You see a shadow of the sun trying to punch through. Weak, pale, like someone remembered how to sketch a circle but forgot the color yellow. It's not much, but it's something. That afternoon, you hear laughter. Real, honest laughter. From a child, chasing a frog through the mud. You cry. Just a little. Just enough. Then you pick up your shovel and you try planting again. Because maybe, just maybe, the fog is starting to lift. The frog doesn't survive the week. Somehow that seems symbolic. The boy who chased it, still laughing, still hungry, buried it himself with a twig cross and a bit of torn cloth. You watched from a distance, hand resting on your stomach, which now rumbles like a muted thundercloud. The fog hasn't vanished, but it's definitely thinner. The sky's still smeared with gray, like a badly washed window. But light is filtering in around the edges. And then, the ships arrive. You're not near the coast, but word spreads fast, even through mud and misery. A rider, half-starved, comes galloping through town, yelling about ghost ships. Vessels drifting into harbors, their sails torn, their crews dead or missing. In some places, they're full of corpses. In others, there's not a soul aboard, just supplies. Some half-rotted, some perfectly intact. You don't know whether to feel dread or hope. Supplies are good. Dead sailors are not. Then it starts raining, but not normal rain. This is black rain, oily, bitter. It leaves streaks on your skin that don't come off easily. When it dries, your clothes smell like burnt metal. At first, people run outside with open mouths, desperate for moisture. But after the third person gets a rash, and a few animals fall sick, no one's trying to collect it anymore. The healer mutters something about sky rot. The priest calls it heaven's bile. You just scrub your skin with a rough cloth and hope it wasn't poisonous. Here's a verified historical fact. Around 536 and in the years following, Byzantine and Middle Eastern records report rain falling that was like soot and left behind dark residue. In some accounts, even snow was said to fall in strange colors, red, brown, or black. These were almost certainly effects of high-atmosphere volcanic particles filtering and contaminating precipitation. You start to understand why everyone thinks the gods are angry. Trade routes have collapsed. Cities are isolating themselves. The road into your village is overgrown with thorn bushes. No one's bothering to maintain it anymore. Every once in a while, a traveler still appears, but they're getting rarer and thinner. One man stumbles in, carrying a scroll case made of bone. He's barefoot, covered in sores, and laughing uncontrollably. When someone tries to help him, he bites. He's dead within 2 days. You burn his things, but his scrolls, oh, those get passed around like forbidden fruit. No one can read half of them, but the parts you can read talk about storms that swallowed islands, eclipses that lasted weeks, cities turned to salt. There's one diagram of a man with his organs labeled in Greek. Someone swears it's a guide to purging the soul through the liver. Someone else says it's a recipe for soup. You don't laugh, but the absurdity helps. And then the sickness hits your village. You'd hoped you'd been spared. Maybe the altitude, maybe luck. But one by one, people start coughing. Not normal coughs. These are deep, hollow, rib-cracking barks that seem to shake the air around them. Some people bleed from the nose, others from the eyes. It spreads faster than hunger ever did. No one wants to say the word, plague, but that's what it is. You see it in the way people move. Slow, cautious, like they're wading through a nightmare and hoping not to wake it. You see it in the empty houses, in the hurried burials, in the way no one touches anymore. You start sleeping with a knife under your pillow, not because of bandits, but because of mercy. You never need to use it, but you think about it. Historians still argue whether this was the onset of the so-called Justinianic plague, which would devastate the Eastern Roman Empire, starting in 541. Some scholars suggest early, scattered outbreaks may have begun even earlier in port cities, carried by rats or infected cargo, perhaps even on some of those ghost ships. You don't know about rats or bacteria or Yersinia pestis, but you know what death looks like when it settles in. The priest dies. So does the healer. No ceremony, no hymns, just hurried bundles of limbs and cloth and earth. You mark their graves with stones, too exhausted to speak. And yet, as the sickness rises, the ash finally begins to fade. One morning, you step outside and see something surreal. A patch of blue sky. It's faint, almost unsure of itself, but it's real. Light, sunlight, pours over your village like water over cracked stone, and the silence breaks. Someone cheers, then someone faints. You just fall to your knees and stare. In the coming days, warmth returns like a timid animal. You feel it in your bones first. Your joints ache less. Your cough eases. You stop waking up with your blanket frozen to your skin. The ground softens. Seeds take root. A few wild flowers bloom. You touch one just to make sure it's not a dream. But the plague doesn't leave just because the sun comes back. That's the cruel twist. Just as life peeks through the cracks, new sprouts, cautious birdsong, babies born half healthy, death keeps pulling people under. Your neighbor dies mid-sentence. A young couple disappears into the woods, leaving their newborn behind. The child survives somehow. You help raise him. You stop counting days or deaths, but you start counting meals again. That's something. You hear rumors of cities quarantining themselves, of ships being burned on sight, of fields left to rot because no one's healthy enough to harvest them. The world isn't recovering, it's rearranging, and not kindly. But here's the quirky historical tidbit. In some parts of the Mediterranean, people believed the plague was carried by a shape-shifting demon with glowing eyes. In one village, they left bowls of wine at crossroads to trap it. In another, they painted red crosses on their doors and never opened them again. You start to believe that people will survive anything. so long as they can name it. And still, you press forward. You plant onions. You dry herbs. You boil everything twice. You tell stories around small fires with big shadows. Sometimes you sing badly, off key, but someone joins in. And then one day, a caravan arrives. Not a ghost ship, not a plague cart. A real caravan. 4 oxen, 3 wagons, 2 camels. Yes, camels. And a merchant who speaks 5 languages and wears too much jewelry. He brings salt, grain, wool, and the first joke you've heard in months. It's not a good joke, but it makes you laugh. Really laugh. The kind that bubbles up from somewhere you thought was long gone. The merchant says the empire is still standing, barely. That the emperor is rebuilding. That trade routes are opening again. That the sun has returned, but the world it shines on is forever changed. You believe him, not because of his words, but because of his eyes. They look tired, like yours. You trade him a blanket for a sack of millet. And you invite him to stay, because that's what people do. Even at the end of everything, they rebuild. The merchant stays for 3 days. He tells stories like songs about cities where the snow fell in July and rivers turned to slush in midsummer. He describes fields abandoned in the east, temples shuttered in India, and monasteries frozen shut in the Alps. He doesn't exaggerate. He doesn't need to. His voice has the calm horror of someone who's walked through enough nightmares to know that truth is the scariest detail. He pulls out a scrap of parchment with blotched ink and crude lines. A map. You and a few others crowd around it, mouths slack, eyes wide. It's not a pretty map. This isn't one of those gold ink Roman treasures. This one's a survivor's map. Stains of ash and blood, corners singed, borders corrected in charcoal. He points to China, says they had snow in summer. Snow while the trees were trying to blossom. He says rice harvests failed 3 years in a row. That whole provinces were eating bark and clay and saltwater fish caught with their bare hands. He points to Ireland. He says they called it a failure of bread. Famines that lasted over 7 years. Stories of holy men performing miracles just to feed a village with a single loaf and a bowl of dried peas. He points to Mesopotamia, where once raging rivers have choked and starved. Then slowly, the water turned brackish. Crops drowned, or dried, or simply refused to grow. You lean closer, trying to read the notes scribbled on the margins. One reads, "Clouds like wool and silence, louder than war." That night, you can't sleep. You step outside and stare up at the sky. It's clearer than it's been in years, but still, something's off. The stars blink with less confidence. The moon is thin, pale, like it's been through something. Maybe you all have. You sit by the dying coals of your fire, thinking about snow in summer. Historical records back this up. In 536 and the years following, snow was recorded in summer months across China and parts of Europe. Chinese sources refer to frost in August, droughts in early spring, and ice in the Yangtze River during what should have been planting season. Irish monks wrote of a failure of bread from 536 to 539, and Mediterranean chronicles mention strange winters that refuse to end. You try to picture it, a bright June morning, and snowflakes falling like ash. You've always known weather could be cruel, but this is different. This isn't a season. This is wrongness. You see it in the plants, which bloom and die within the same week. You see it in the birds, some of which have never been this far north before, others that vanished entirely. You hear it in the wind, which doesn't know what direction to blow anymore, and you feel it in your bones, an ache that doesn't match the temperature, that settles in your spine like a memory. Some days you try to track the sun, where it rises, where it sets, but the light doesn't follow the old rules. It's duller, more sideways. Shadows stretch in the wrong directions. You wonder if the sun's orbit has changed. You wonder if the earth tilted in its sleep. You ask the merchant, and he just shrugs. You're not the only one wondering, he says. The stars disagree with the sky now. The stars disagree. You try not to think about it too hard. Instead, you help rebuild the road into town. You clear the thorn bushes, fill in the mud ruts with gravel, and mark the path with small white stones. It feels like progress, like opening a door that's been stuck for years. Other villagers begin planting again, not just for survival, for beauty. One woman cultivates a patch of blue flowers near the well. She doesn't know their name, says she found the seeds wrapped in cloth in a dead man's pocket. They bloom anyway. You keep bees now, or try to. The bees are not what they used to be. They're nervous, scattered, aggressive. You get stung 3 times your first week. But one day, you find a lump of wax in the corner of your shed. You press it to your lips and weep. Honey. Actual, bitter honey. Take a syrup, golden as a dream. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. In parts of Europe, post-famine beekeeping exploded. Not just for honey, but for wax, which was needed for candles as the darkness dragged on. In fact, some communities used bees as primitive barometers. When bees wouldn't fly, they knew the air was wrong. In 537, bees in Gaul reportedly swarmed in circles for days, refusing to return to hives. One night, someone suggests a feast. The suggestion hangs there for a minute. Suspicious, absurd. But then someone else offers to trade their last salted turnip. Another brings fermented cabbage. Someone else volunteers dried squirrel. You offer honey. The priest's old wine is dug up from his cellar. The feast is terrible and perfect. You all gather in the square, wrapped in threadbare cloaks, sipping warm cabbage wine and chewing squirrel jerky like it's a delicacy. The children run in circles, laughing like they've never known what hunger means. You sing, you clap, you dance, and for the first time in years, nobody cries that night, but the sky still watches you. It's clearer, yes, but not trustworthy. The clouds still roll in too fast. Storms appear without warning. Lightning cracks across fields on days that begin warm and sunny. You've learned to never trust a blue sky. It might be hiding something. You start keeping a journal, just scraps of thoughts. A drawing here, a list there. You track weather patterns, dream symbols. When the bees wake up, when the river turns clear. You write in case someone else finds it one day, or in case you forget what normal was. You hear from a passing tinker that Constantinople has survived. The emperor, Justinian, is still on his throne, though his court has thinned. He's sending envoys to find out what happened to the sun. He's building a church the size of a mountain. Some say it's penance, others say it's fear. You admire that kind of hope. Or hubris. They're not so different anymore. The tinker says the roads south are safer, that trade caravans are moving again, that fish are returning to the rivers, that there was snowfall in the Alps, but in the right season, for once. You ask him what year it is. He hesitates. Still, 538, I think, he says. Though time's been slippery. You nod. Slippery is right, but you don't feel lost in it anymore. You've weathered 2 years of ash-choked skies, crop failure, madness, sickness, ghost ships, and black rain. And somehow, you're still here. You still wake up. You still chew bark on bad days and drink cabbage wine on good ones. You still hum to yourself when the bees buzz too loud. You are not whole, but you are awake, and the sun is trying. You wake one morning to silence. Not the heavy, haunted silence that's blanketed your world for the past 2 years. The kind that made birds vanish and made children afraid of wind. No, this silence is lighter. A pause, not a void. Like the world is holding its breath for something better. You step outside. The sun is back. Really back. It still feels shy. It's light, thin, filtered, but it cuts shadows again. The air no longer tastes like charcoal and regret. You squint into the sky like a sailor glimpsing shore. And then, impossibly, you smile. The trees respond first. By mid-spring, they're stretching their limbs, leaves unfurling like slow applause. Green creeps back into the landscape, like paint returning to a faded fresco. Fields that used to resemble forgotten graveyards now glow with stubborn little shoots. Your hands itch to dig, to plant, to dare. So you do. Not just wheat or barley, but beans, onions, even fruit trees, though you know they won't feed anyone for years. Hope, after all, is a long-term investment. Your knees hurt and your back aches, but you're laughing more. Dirt under your nails feels like a blessing. The world, it seems, has remembered how to live, but not everyone made it. When you travel now, south, east, west, you find more ruins than towns. Entire villages swallowed by ivy, overrun by silence. Skeletons of houses with doors still ajar. You walk through one such place one evening, your breath fogging faintly in the air, and find a set of footprints baked into the mud, leading nowhere. You follow them until they vanish. You don't know why that chills you more than the bones. There's a theory among modern historians that 536 wasn't just a climate catastrophe. It was a civilizational bottleneck. Cities shrank, villages disappeared, trade routes fractured. people didn't just die, they stopped being connected. Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa saw cultural and political retrenchment. Some call it a mini dark age within the dark ages. But dark doesn't mean empty. You start seeing signs of new life along the roads. Little shrines rebuilt, small inns with patched roofs, markets starting with just a single table of goods, a boy trading rabbit fur for iron nails, a woman with clay pots offering fermented milk. You begin to carry things with you: beeswax, dried herbs, written prayers. Barter is less about value now and more about trust. Every exchange is a kind of promise. I am here. I want to build again. One day, on a cracked Roman road, you meet a monk. He's thin, wide-eyed, carrying more scrolls than bread. His sandals are worn down to the threads. He asks if you've seen the stars lately. You say yes. They've been coming back. Not all of them, but enough. He nods solemnly. Then the sky is healing. You walk with him a while. He says he's headed north to find what's left of a monastery near Tours. They had libraries once. He wants to rebuild them. He says that memory matters now more than ever. That the worst part of the long winter wasn't the hunger. It was the forgetting. He tells you people began to forget the names of herbs, of stars, of rivers. Entire languages may have vanished in silence. You give him one of your journals, the one with drawings of bee flight patterns and flowering dates. He treats it like gold. Debate still exists today about how much knowledge was lost in this period. Was it a temporary pause or a genuine cultural amnesia? Some argue that libraries in Byzantium preserved the learning through this crisis. Others say smaller, oral cultures may have lost entire epics, myths, or healing techniques. We'll never really know, but you decide not to forget. You start teaching the village children the names of things, not just practical ones, like wheat and river and storm, but the pretty ones too. Dandelion, fog, lullaby, starling. You tell them stories, even if you have to make them up, about a time when the world went dark, but humans remembered how to make light. It works. They listen. They remember. Some of them start to write. And here's a quirky fact. In the late 530s and 540s, styluses and wax tablets used for writing began showing up again in archaeological layers in Europe, even in places where they'd vanished centuries earlier. It's as if people were trying to start over, not just with farming or roads, but with storytelling. The feast you began last year becomes a tradition. Now, people bring gifts. The cabbage wine has improved, marginally. One man plays a crude flute carved from ash wood. Children put on a play, something about a bee queen who saves the sun from drowning. It's terrible. You love every second. You start hearing jokes again, the kind that don't come from nervousness, but from actual joy. Someone roasts a turnip. Someone else says, "Don't let it catch fire. We might summon another volcano." Everyone laughs until they cough, and you, weird, stubborn you, start carving runes into stones and burying them near the fields. No one knows what they mean. You don't either, but it feels important. Like laying down breadcrumbs for future people, letting them know we were here, we kept going. The bees are calmer now. They hum in long, even rhythms. And you swear they're dancing when the sun hits them just right. The honey flows more easily. One day, it even tastes sweet. The moon rises, full and shameless. And you sleep, not in fear, but in peace. Because you made it. The year is 540, and spring has returned to the earth. The year is 541. And just when you thought the world was healing, the rats arrive. You don't notice them at first. Not really. They're always around, right? Rooting through waste, slipping through cracks in the granary, flickering shadows in the corners of your vision. But something changes. Their numbers swell. Their boldness grows. You see one nibbling on a dead bird at noon, in full view of the market, as if it owns the street. And then the cough begins. Not yours, someone else's. A child, then a mother. A week later, a young monk vomits black bile behind the chapel and collapses mid-prayer. When you go to help him, his eyes are wide and wet. He's not shivering, he's shaking, like his soul wants to leave his body before the rest catches up. You cradle his head. He whispers, "It burns." By the next morning, he's dead. You bury him with herbs and prayers. But it's not enough, because it wasn't just a fever. It's plague, not symbolic plague. Not bad time plague. Not the sheep got foot rot and the grain molded kind of plague. No, this is capital P plague. And you, lucky soul that you are now living through one of the most infamous pandemics in history. The Plague of Justinian, named centuries later for the Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian III, whose reign is about to be wrecked by the very pestilence his empire is trying to outpace. And here's your mainstream historical fact. The first confirmed outbreak of bubonic plague in recorded history hits in 541 AD, starting somewhere in Egypt, likely in Pelusium, before racing across the Mediterranean like a wildfire. And you're standing right in its path. You can smell the fear. Cities go quiet in days. The roads that once hummed with carts and pilgrims and beeswax traders fall silent again. But the silence is different. This one drips. It's heavy with rot, with breathless waiting, with the sharp vinegar sting of desperation. You know the signs now. It begins with a swelling, a hard lump under the armpit or groin, burning skin, delirium. Within hours, the body turns inward, fever, vomiting, then a kind of stillness, like the body has given up on fighting and is just preparing to surrender. And you know what's worse? It spreads fast. There are whispers that just touching the clothes of the dead is enough to kill, that the air itself is sick, that God has finally decided He's done with humans and is wiping the slate clean. Historians still argue how exactly the plague spread so explosively. Was it fleas carried by black rats, hitching rides on grain ships? Was it pneumonic, transmissible through coughing and breath, or even some unknown form unique to this moment? The evidence is murky, but the devastation is crystal clear. The monk who gave you beeswax just 2 summers ago is gone. The woman who made the terrible cabbage wine gone. You dig more graves in a week than you did during the darkest months of 536. You stop counting. It doesn't help. You start seeing people wandering outside the walls again. Not refugees this time, but carriers. Pale faces, ragged clothes, the telltale look of people who don't know where to run anymore. Some are praying, some are screaming. A few are laughing in that brittle, broken way that makes your skin crawl. You start locking your door at night, but even that feels silly. You can't lock out the air. Still, you cling to your rituals. You burn herbs in the corners. You tie charms around your wrists, salted rope, bone beads, copper keys. A girl down the road starts painting her door red. Every morning, muttering the names of Roman gods no one remembers anymore. The prayers are jumbled, half Christian, half something older. But who are you to judge? You wear a linen scarf soaked in vinegar over your nose and mouth and call it medicine. You sleep next to a bag of garlic and pretend it helps. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. In Constantinople, people reportedly tried all kinds of odd plague cures. Hanging amulets made from the bones of cats, burning sulfur indoors, even listening to certain melodies believed to drive away demons. One chronicler claimed that red shoes warded off infection. You don't have red shoes. You do your best. You're tired. Not just from the digging and the weeping and the watching, but from being afraid. And then, a strange thing happens. It hits your village, hard, and then it leaves. As quickly as it came, you survive, again. Barely. You're not unscarred. Who could be? Your ribs show. Your hair has thinned. You twitch at every sneeze. But you're alive. And so are a few dozen others. You gather in what's left of the town square and look at each other like survivors of a shipwreck. There's a girl who's missing half her family and now talks to birds. A shepherd who won't touch wool anymore. A midwife who keeps her hands wrapped in linen even when she sleeps. And then there's you, somehow still standing. The trees are still green. The bees still hum. But the world is quieter. There are fewer feet on the paths. Fewer lights in the hills. You learn something uncomfortable. Humanity is not permanent. It's not even common. It's a flickering thing, like a candle held up in a cave. But good news, that candle is stubborn. You start rebuilding again. The fields don't care about plague. They respond to the rain, not the sorrow. So you plant. You dig with blistered hands and knees that crack like old doors. But you dig. You coax potatoes from the ground like secrets. You bake bread again. You hear children laughing. A boy carves a tiny flute from bone and plays the same song every morning. It's awful. It's wonderful. One morning, you wake and realize you're humming again. Not a song, just noise. Life noise. You light a small fire. Brew something that almost resembles tea. Watch the sun rise, and you think, maybe we'll be okay. Maybe. You are not okay. Well, you're not dead. Which in the grand lottery of the 6th century counts as a win. But okay? No. Let's not kid ourselves. The fields are still half empty. The streets are quiet in a way you'll never get used to. You pass houses that haven't been opened in months, the doors warped by weather and silence. The smell of rot is mostly gone, thank the gods. But there's a dampness that clings to everything. Like the world itself forgot how to feel warm. Still, you work, because what else is there? Your muscles ache in that familiar, strangely comforting way. You till, plant, harvest, repeat. You kneel beside the earth, so often you've started muttering to it like a stubborn mule. Sometimes, you think it listens. A sprout where you least expect it. A fat turnip on a stringy vine. The basics are coming back. So, naturally, the taxes come back too. See, you thought disaster might have softened the empire. Maybe they'd forget about your small village in the mountains. Maybe the tax collector would show up, take one look at your empty granary and hollow-eyed neighbors, and decide, hey, let's give them a few years. Nope. You hear the clatter of hooves before you see him. New tunic, polished boots, and behind him, a clerk scribbling into a scroll, so long it drags in the dust. They come bearing imperial edicts, sealed with wax and doom. The gist? The grain levy is reinstated, and yes, you still owe back taxes from the plague years. You blink. Plague years? You mean the ones where you had to bury your cousin with a shovel carved from driftwood and barter socks for salt? Yes, those years. Apparently, the restoration of Rome's greatness doesn't pause for existential collapse. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Justinian I wasn't just the name behind the nasty plague. He was also the emperor who tried to restore the Roman Empire's territorial glory. His conquests stretched from North Africa to parts of Italy, led by his famous general Belisarius. But all of that, his grand vision, the gleaming domes of Constantinople, was built on the backs of taxpayers like you. And so the officials arrive with smiles that don't reach their eyes, and scales that always seem to tip in their favor. You offer barley instead of wheat. Bad season, you say? Disease wiped half our yield. They nod, pretending to take notes. Then they take the barley anyway. And your goat, you want to scream. Instead, you chew your cheek until you taste iron and nod like a good little imperial citizen. The clerk writes something on your door in chalk. You don't ask what it says. You already know, Osmore. Evenings become quiet again, but not with peace, with exhaustion. There's no strength left for music or gossip, just tired hands, creaking backs, and the low murmur of people trying to convince each other this is temporary. You start dreaming of deserts, not as punishment, as freedom, hot, empty, quiet freedom. You meet a traveler who tells you stories of the Arabian Peninsula, of wild camel markets, and tribes who roam with the stars. No taxes there, he says. No emperors. Just sand and wind. It sounds tempting, but you don't go because someone has to rebuild. Instead, you fix the roof, not the whole thing, just enough to keep the frost out. You start tending bees again. Fewer hives than before, but they buzz with familiar spite. One stings you on the lip, and you laugh for the first time in weeks, because that's the kind of pain you understand. You trade honey for linen, and patch your neighbor's cloak. In return, she knits you mittens with thumbs so crooked they might be magic. You wear them anyway, and just like that, community creeps back, slow and sneaky, like a cat that doesn't want to admit it missed you. You notice it first in the children. They start playing again, a game involving sticks, rocks, and a disturbing amount of shouting. You can't tell if it has rules. You don't care. It's noise, and it's joy. And that's enough. Then the old man, who used to run the olive press, starts singing again, badly, off-key, and a little drunk. But it spreads, laughter in the streets, smoke from every chimney, a strange soup bubbling in a borrowed cauldron that smells like redemption. You're still hungry, still undertaxed and overworked, but you have hope, a flickering, defiant kind, like a candle made from last year's wax, and a thread you pulled from your sleeve. And this is where things get interesting, because somehow, amidst plague and famine and bureaucratic cruelty, something beautiful starts to stir. Trade routes reopen, slowly, tentatively. You see spices again, real ones, cloves, pepper, maybe even cinnamon if you squint. Silks appear in the market, not many, just a few bolts, but enough to remind you that the world is big, and somewhere far off, people are weaving beauty into fabric instead of death into scrolls. A scholar wanders through town, thin, wild-haired, carrying a satchel of books no one can read. He trades stories for bread, tells you about mathematics from India, medicine from Persia, a clock built with water and moonlight. You let him stay in the barn. He smells like ink and forgotten things. And that night, while the wind scratches at your shutters, he shows you how to make fire with flint and a damp rag. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some historians believe that the darkest years of this century sparked innovations in fire-making and food preservation techniques that quietly changed how rural folks lived. Smoking meat with pine needles, pickling turnips in brine, and beer, even cold cellars built into riverbanks. Not glamorous, but game-changing. You learn, you adapt, you teach, and soon, you're not just surviving, you're living again. Not like before, not with blind faith that the world will behave itself, but with a sharper kind of hope, a skeptical one, well, we're still here, so let's make soup kind of attitude. You sit one evening on a hill above your village. It's cold, your knees ache, but your hands are full, bread in one, a cup of something suspiciously fruity in the other. You watch smoke rise from chimneys. You count 6, a few more than last month. Down the road, someone's playing a flute. It's still awful, but now it sounds like home. And for the first time, in a long, long night, you believe in tomorrow. You wake up to the sound of bells, not funeral bells. Thank all the gods. No, these are brighter, tinny, homemade, probably strung up by the baker's kids. They clang like chaos and sound like hope. You shuffle outside, rubbing sleep from your eyes with mittens that are more patch than wool. And there, at the village square, is something that hasn't been seen in what feels like a lifetime. A market, not a grim swap of moldy potatoes and wilted turnips. Not the quiet barter of grief survivors. An honest-to-goodness, colorful, noisy market. There's a man juggling apples. Someone's goat is wearing a flower crown. A carpenter is showing off a chair with only 2 wobbly legs. Someone else is roasting chestnuts in a dented helmet. You blink at the brightness of it all. The noise, the smell, smoke, and cloves, and overcooked lentils. You almost forget that half the people here once stood over mass graves. But that's the thing, isn't it? People survive. Not neatly, not heroically, but completely, messily, and somehow with more song than you'd expect. And that's the beginning of something new. Here's what the historians might call this period: the slow rebirth. It doesn't get headlines like plagues or emperors, but it's real. Crops come back. Not great, but good enough. Livestock repopulates. The population, too, begins its hesitant climb. Church bells ring more often, and not always for funerals. There are baptisms again, weddings. You even attend one. Your neighbor's cousin marrying a woman from 2 valleys over. They met at a grain exchange. Romance, 6th century style. There's mead, laughter, a fiddle that could double as a weapon, and someone brings out a board game, so ancient it might predate bread. And somewhere between the clapping and the dancing and the dangerously undercooked pigeon, you realize the worst might actually be over. Of course, the empire hasn't noticed. In Constantinople, Emperor Justinian is busy fighting everyone. Vandals in Africa, Ostrogoths in Italy, rebels in every direction. His general Belisarius is doing his best, but it's like trying to play chess during an earthquake. Every time he wins a city, another one revolts. Mainstream historical fact alert. Justinian's military campaigns temporarily reclaimed huge parts of the old Western Roman Empire, including North Africa and Italy. But these conquests came at colossal cost, economically, politically, and in sheer human lives. Many historians debate whether his ambitions overextended the empire, draining its resources and weakening its future defenses. Meanwhile, your village just wants a tax break and some shoes. But guess what? You do get shoes. Well, 1 pair, shared among 3 households. But still, real leather, mostly matching. You host a feast to celebrate. The newbies gave good honey this year. Your uncle's lentils don't taste like socks for once. And the scholar in the barn finally shaved. Sort of. And in the corner, wrapped in a wool cloak, stitched with prayers, sits a small boy clutching a wax tablet and stylus. He's writing. You ask him what he's working on. A story, he says, about before, before the sickness, before the soldiers, before the silence. You glance around at your neighbors, scarred, hunched, laughing. You look at the mismatched candles, the fraying bunting, the bread with too much salt and not enough yeast. You nod. Good. Someone should remember. Here's your quirky detail of the night. In the wake of the plague and social upheaval, it's believed that rural storytelling, oral histories, and even simple scratchings on wax or bark became more common, not for fame or literature, but because people were desperately trying to preserve something. A recipe, a charm, a name. You start writing too. Not much, just small things. Notes about when to plant turnips, which mushrooms don't kill you, how to convince bees not to murder you when stealing honey. Little legacies. One winter, a monk passes through, barefoot, grinning. Absurd. He gives you a coin, says it's Byzantine, worth a fortune. But mostly, he just likes the eagle on it. You thank him with boiled eggs and firewood. Before he leaves, he says something strange. Even ash remembers the tree it came from. You don't know what he means. Not really, but it stays with you. By year 10, after the plague, though no one's sure exactly when it ended, you've grown into someone new. You don't just endure, you shape, you build things that last longer than grief. Fences, barns, traditions. You become the person others come to when they need to fix a roof, or settle an argument, or borrow the one book that isn't moldy. You still flinch at the sound of coughing. You still avoid certain paths near the old mass graves. But you smile more than you cry. And when your niece draws pictures in the dirt of what your village looked like before, you take her hand and show her how to draw what it looks like now. Because now is beautiful in a way before never was. You sit under a sky crackling with stars. Next to you, the boy with the wax tablet writes about bees. The old man snores beside the fire. Someone's singing again, off key and full of wine. You sip something hot. You wrap a blanket around your knees, and you whisper to the wind, "We're still here." By now, you've stopped counting winters. They blur together. Fewer wolves, more babies, less ash in the wind. But even without a calendar, your bones feel it. The world is tilting forward again, not racing, not recovering in the way kings like to promise, but tilting, stretching, like a bear out of hibernation. Still, you're not the only one rising from the cold. Far to the east, in the steppes where the wind tastes like metal and the horses outnumber the humans, a new tide is forming. Riders, movements, names you don't yet know how to pronounce. And westward, rumors swirl like chimney smoke. Frankish lords grabbing land like kids grabbing pies. Saxons pushing deeper into Britannia. Even the Irish monks scribbling away on sheepskin sense it. Something's changing. For the first time since the sky darkened, people are thinking beyond survival. They're thinking about power again. Your own corner of the world isn't exactly plotting an empire, but your village now has 2 smiths, a traveling barber, and, brace yourself, a tax collector. You hate him naturally. Everyone does. But his presence means the empire remembers you exist, which, given recent history, feels like a compliment. One afternoon, a merchant passes through carrying saffron. Actual saffron. Not the yellow moss you've been pretending is saffron for years. You gasp, like you've seen a unicorn. He also has tin mirrors, black pepper, and what he swears is a comb from India. You buy none of it, but you do stare. And you remember, once upon a time, you traded with the world. Let's talk about that world. Mainstream historical fact coming at you. The so-called late antique Little Ice Age caused not just crop failures, but a contraction of global trade networks. The Silk Road slowed. Spice routes faltered. Ships stayed in port. Empires shrank inward. By the time the 540s rolled around, much of the Mediterranean economy had collapsed. Not with an explosion, but with a shrug. And yet, by the late 540s and early 550s, merchants begin to move again. It's not a flood, not yet, but you start to see strangers again. A Berber with indigo-dyed robes. A Greek with coins that glitter like stolen stars. A young woman from somewhere far east, speaking a dialect that dances like bird song. They all bring stories. You sip thin beer and listen. Apparently, India's been trading pepper and pearls like nothing happened. Southern China's buzzing again. In Persia, the Sasanian kings are still playing chess with the Romans, only now with fewer pawns and more broken tiles. You'd laugh, but the Persian chess set might be literal. Time for your quirky tidbit of the night. In some regions, to restart trade after the collapse, people didn't use coins or gold. They traded songbirds. No joke. In parts of Northern Europe, rare singing finches were considered valuable commodities, used in bartering across villages. Tiny, feathery proof that life still sang. Back in your home, your niece trains a bird to say rude things about the tax man. You feel oddly proud. One day, a donkey arrives, dragging a cart covered in silk. It's not the silk that grabs your attention. It's what's under it. Books. Actual books. Not tablets. Not bark scrolls. Real parchment. Ink. The whole sacred-smelling package. You nearly cry. The owner's a scholar. Of course. Bald. Frazzled. Possibly unbathed since the last comet. But kind. He lets your village touch the pages with clean hands and read the letters aloud. You huddle together, deciphering Latin like it's forbidden treasure. And it sort of is, because in those pages is proof people didn't forget. There's poetry, grain records, star maps, a letter to someone named Amicia that is, quite frankly, scandalously romantic. You blush. Your niece giggles. The old widow mutters, "About time." You end the night by telling stories under the stars. Your words weaving around the fire like vines. No one notices at first that the fire gives off less smoke. But you do, because the air is changing. Historians still argue whether the climate began to stabilize in the 540s or the 550s. You overhear the scholar mutter, chin deep in ink. Some models suggest volcanic aerosols persisted for a decade. Others claim secondary eruptions or even solar activity shifts contributed to continued cooling. You nod as if you understand any of that. You don't, but you do understand this. The trees are blooming more predictably. Bees are back. The river floods less. Children born in the last 5 years have never seen the sky turn red. That counts for something. Your own life is quieter now. You've become the person who remembers things. The kids ask you if the plague had fangs. You tell them no, but the taxman does. They cackle. The barley this year is good, almost like the old days. You brew ale that doesn't taste like remorse. You teach your niece how to thatch a roof and curse creatively. You replant the apple trees. One of them even fruits. You call it Hope, the tree, not your niece. Her name is worse. It's Thistle. You didn't name her. There's still danger, of course. A neighboring village is taken over by bandits who call themselves Knights of the Broken Sun, which is dramatic, if historically inaccurate. You deal with it the old-fashioned way. Bribes, gossip, and sending them a wedding invitation covered in glitter glue and sarcasm. They never show up. You suspect one of them now makes shoes in your village under an assumed name. You don't tell. And then, one autumn, you get a visitor, tall, weather-worn, wearing a brooch with the old imperial eagle. He says he's from Rome, which is impossible because Rome is dead, right? Apparently, not entirely. He tells you the Senate still technically meets. Justinian still rules. The walls still stand. Fewer fountains. More cats. But the heart beats. Come visit, he says. You smile, shake your head, and offer him soup. But when he leaves, you sit under your apple tree and whisper to the wind again. Maybe someday. And in that moment, you realize something strange. You want someday. You've lived so long in disaster. You forgot what it felt like to plan for joy. Now, you think about traveling, about rebuilding, about writing something that lasts. And for the first time in years, you don't feel afraid of the future. You feel curious. The world is still scarred, still bruised, still stitched together with stubborn hope and boiled cabbage. But it spins, and so do you. Not fast, not perfectly, but forward. You never did go to Rome, at least not yet. But something changed the day that man came. He left behind more than stories and soup stains on your best cup. He left possibility. And once possibility plants its seed in your mind, it's hard to ignore the rustling. You start walking farther, up hills you used to avoid, down roads that once felt like dead ends. You chat with travelers, not just for gossip, but for maps. You find yourself tracing lines in the dirt, sketching rivers, guessing where Byzantium might lie if you keep the sun at your back and your knees agreeable. Your niece, Thistle, that firebrand, is the worst influence. She wants to see Constantinople and says things like, "We should go east until our shoes melt." You tell her you're too old. She says, "Then let's get you new knees." She's charming like a goat. Meanwhile, something unexpected happens. A letter, written, delivered, sealed. You stare at the wax like it might bite you. It's from a cousin in the north. You barely remember. He's alive. He writes about the sea, about salt, about surviving the worst winters in 50 years, and still rebuilding. He says the snow finally retreated like a sulking ghost, and the fish are back. He even mentions a thing called a windmill. You blink. What? Apparently, monks in his area have started building wooden towers that spin in the breeze and grind grain without human help. It sounds like sorcery, or laziness, or brilliance. You're not sure which, but the idea lingers in your mind, whirring quietly. Mainstream historical moment, incoming. Around the mid-500s, especially in the Islamic world and parts of Europe, early versions of windmills and watermills began to reappear and spread slowly. These technologies weren't new, but they were being relearned, repurposed, and shared again. A small sign that innovation wasn't dead, just hibernating. It's like the world remembered how to be clever again. Your village finally repairs the old Roman aqueduct pipe. It leaks less now. The water doesn't taste like coins anymore. The fields drink it gratefully. Even the goats stop complaining. Sort of. Your people start building new barns with roofs that slant just so, because someone remembered watching a builder before the plague. And someone else remembers how to make bricks without them crumbling like old cheese. Memory is your greatest currency now. You don't have much gold, but you have knowledge, shared like bread, mended like cloaks. You become a teacher without meaning to. Here's how you mend a net. Here's how you know when the frost lies. Here's how you bury a child without burying yourself. The last one hurts to say, but the young ones need it. One of the children, you think he's related to someone named Thatched Beard, but no one's sure, starts keeping a journal with charcoal and bark, mostly. But he writes every day what he sees, what he dreams. He's 6. You ask him why. He says, "So they'll know we were here." You nearly choke on your soup, because for the first time, someone's thinking about posterity, not just making it through the day, but making sure the future knows your name. That's new. That's powerful. Quirky bedtime fact of the night. In parts of Merovingian France, some surviving cemeteries from the mid to late 6th century include grave goods, coins, tools, even toy swords. Archaeologists believe these were not just for status, but for memory. People buried loved ones with their most telling object, so that future generations would recognize the life lived, even if the name was forgotten. You imagine what you'd be buried with. Your worn-out sandals, that dented cup, maybe just a scrap of bark, where you once carved the words. We got through it. Spring comes with less drama now. It rains, yes, but not like wrath. The river floods, yes, but not like judgment. It feels normal. And for the first time in your life, normal feels like a miracle. Bees hum with purpose. Your apple tree, hope, is blooming with such shameless optimism that even the widow smiles at it and mutters, "Show off." The village throws a feast, not for a wedding, not for a funeral, just because someone roasts a pig. Someone else brings honey cakes. Your niece invents a dance that looks like a fight between a stork and a drunk squirrel. You laugh so hard you forget what year it is. That's a good sign. And then, in the middle of it all, someone asks the question no one's dared say aloud in decades. Should we build a school? You freeze. A real school? Not just bark scribbles and whispered stories. A place with benches and ink and questions. The vote is nearly unanimous. Even the grumpy beekeeper agrees. Though he insists on teaching bee anatomy, which no one asked for, you help design it. You even write the motto. If the sky darkens again, let knowledge be our fire. It's pretentious and a little weepy, but no one argues. They just nod because they remember, and so you begin again. The world still bears its scars. You still have nightmares sometimes about coughing fits and red skies and funerals where no one came. But they fade because the days are long now. The meals are warm and the children are louder than ever. They don't whisper anymore. They shout. They chase each other through streets that used to be silent. They argue about stars and saints and whether ghosts sneeze. They plant fig trees and dream of boats. And sometimes, when the moon is high and the village is asleep, you sit beneath your apple tree and listen, not for hoofbeats, not for thunder, not for death. You listen for laughter, and you hear it. You survived the end of the world, and now you're living in the beginning of another. The road to Byzantium begins with a goat. Naturally, you weren't really planning on going anywhere, of course. That was just talk, like when people say they'll go to Alexandria next spring, or learn Greek once the harvest settles. But then, Thistle's goat, an absolute menace, named Turnip, chews through a sack of imported salt someone was storing from the south, causes a market brawl, and accidentally headbutts the baker's son into a barrel of fish brine. Turnip is sentenced to exile. Thistle chooses exile too, and somehow you go with her. You've never left your region. Not really. A few valleys over during famine. Once to a ruined fort in your teens. But this is different. This is east. This is toward Constantinople. People start to call you the ones chasing the sun. You'd prefer the ones with a solid plan. But alas, the journey is slow and hard, but also miraculous. Because the empire you fear dead, it's not. It's cracked, weary, and different. But it breathes. In one town, a priest shares his bread and tells you how Justinian has risen from illness and issued a flurry of decrees. About church doctrine, sure, but also about law. He's rewriting the empire's rulebook, making it simpler, sharper, trying to unify a thing that's constantly threatening to splinter apart. Mainstream historical moment. This becomes the Corpus Juris Civilis, Justinian's Code, a massive legal reform effort that, believe it or not, will echo all the way into modern European legal systems. Even France's Napoleonic Code tips its hat to Justinian. You're walking through a world that's relearning how to organize itself. And that organization means fewer roving bands of bandits, fewer random taxes from self-appointed warlords, more Roads. Actual usable roads. You're stunned. In a village, perched like a hat on a hill. You meet a man named Eutropius. He's building something. Tall, pointy, covered in ropes. It's a crane, he says, for rebuilding our church tower. You squint. Isn't that dangerous? He laughs. What? Like staying here during the famine, wasn't? Touché. Turns out, he learned the design from Syrian stoneworkers who passed through during the droughts. They left behind more than camel spit and legends. They left knowledge, sketches, techniques, ways to lift things bigger than you, heavier than your grief. Quirky tidbit time. In the wake of disasters, technology doesn't stop. It gets weird. Some surviving records from monastic communities show sudden bursts of experimentation, particularly with building methods. One theory is that when population drops, labor becomes precious. So devices like treadwheel cranes, think giant hamster wheels for humans, became more common, allowing fewer workers to lift bigger loads. You actually see one in use. And the sight of three grown men power walking inside a spinning wooden wheel to raise a bell tower is so absurdly wonderful. You nearly cry. Thistle laughs until she hiccups. But every high has its low. In the marshlands of the Black Sea coast, you stumble into what feels like a forgotten world. Whole villages where the plague still lingers. Not in the bodies, but in the silence. You meet a woman who refuses to speak above a whisper. A child who won't sleep indoors. A fisherman who sails upriver daily, alone, muttering a list of names like a spell. It's a reminder, this isn't over. It's never just over. Grief echoes. Trauma lingers. You learn not to ask why people leave a cup of wine at empty tables. You just accept it. You do the same. By the time you reach the city gates of Constantinople, you are older, dirtier, and less romantic about goat-related travel. But you're here. You are here. And the city is alive, buzzing, towering, patched together like a tapestry repaired by three different grandmothers arguing about color, ships, rock in the harbor like cradles. Merchants argue in Greek, Latin, Arabic. A man offers Thistle a pet monkey in exchange for her dagger. She declines with surprising diplomacy. And above it all, Hagia Sophia, massive, golden, floating in the light like a breath held for centuries. You stand in the center of it, right under the dome, and forget how to blink. It's impossible. How did they do this in the age of ash and ruin? Here's the historical debate for tonight. Scholars still argue whether the post-536 rebuilding of Constantinople was part of a deliberate imperial strategy, or whether it emerged from local determination despite top-down neglect. Either way, the Hagia Sophia, rebuilt after riots, completed around 537, is a symbol that refused to die. Like the city itself, like you spend the night in a shelter by the docks. You smell like goat, but you fall asleep, listening to the sea slap the stone walls. And you don't dream of fire or famine, you dream of light. The next morning, Thistle turns to you and says, "I want to stay." And you know she means it. You nod. And in that moment, something inside you settles. You've chased the sun long enough. It's okay to let it rise without you for once. You become a doc scribe. You copy manifests, translate receipts. Everyone needs someone who can write legibly and not steal pepper. Thistle trains as a mosaic apprentice. She's better at it than she admits. Turnip lives in a courtyard, taunting pigeons and defying mortality. You have a room with a small balcony. It's ugly. It's perfect. Sometimes you wake in the night and still think you're back in that smoky year, staring at a sky that never brightened. But then the light comes. It always comes now. You wake one morning to find Constantinople crackling with tension again. But this time, it's not plague, not famine, not even the occasional monkey thief trying to barter for swords. No. Today, it's war. Not the kind with screaming in the streets or flames on the skyline. Not yet. This one moves with boots, whispers, horses with trimmed manes, and imperial crests on their saddlebags. The Empire wants its borders back. You hear it from a dockhand named Maximus, who smells permanently like olive oil and tells stories that are 30% truth, 70% gusto. He's unloading a shipment of armor plates when he leans over and says, "They're pushing west. Africa, Italy. Justinian's going for the old glory." You raise an eyebrow. Isn't that optimistic? Maximus grins, hoists a crate onto his shoulder, and says, "We're overdue for optimism, friend. But you've seen what optimism can cost. It's 546 now. A decade since that cursed year, 536, when the sky refused to shine. And still, in some corners of the city, the scars pulse like living things. There's a boy on your street who won't touch wheat. Says the bread still smells wrong. His mother cries when no one's looking. People say they're moving forward, but some of them are dragging their ghosts behind them like laundry sacks. The war effort, though, is real. Boats leave the harbor by the dozen, carrying soldiers and dreams. You copy out ledgers that list absurd amounts of dried fish, wool cloaks, iron blades. You write the word slingstone 50 times before realizing you've spelled it wrong every time. It doesn't matter. They'll bleed the same. Mainstream historical moment. Justinian's military campaigns, spearheaded by his famous general, Belisarius, push into North Africa and Italy. By 546, Rome itself is in chaos. Ostrogoths and Byzantines trade control like children fighting over a toy. The city changes hands multiple times. Each time, it breaks a little more. You hear the stories from returning soldiers. There were no dogs in the city. One says, haunted. What, you ask? They ate them all. Nothing left. The empire, it seems, can expand its reach, but not without bleeding. The Hagia Sophia gets a new mosaic. It shows the emperor, stoic and gold-plated, offering a model of the church to Christ. But you notice something odd. No depiction of the ash year, no darkness, no gray skies. It's as if 536 was an awkward uncle they've all agreed not to mention. Thistle scoffs. History's a liar when it wants to be. You chuckle. You think someone will remember what really happened. She shrugs. Only if someone writes it down. So you do. At night, on scraps. The ash year. The goat. The man spinning inside a crane. The woman who whispered through the plague. The time you bartered with a monk for 2 eggs and a riddle. You write it all, because even if the world forgets the dim years, you don't want you to. One day, a man from the Imperial Library shows up at the dock. He's old, wears sandals like a philosopher, and squints like his eyes forgot how to trust daylight. He reads over your shoulder while you're copying a grain manifest. "This is neat," he says. Not a lot of neat hands these days. You nod politely, keep writing. Then he says, "We need scribes." You freeze. The word lentils turns into lintels on the page. He chuckles. "I'm not joking. Empire's growing. Need records, treaties, letters, tax ledgers. And fewer people are educated than ever before. Want to see the archives? You go, because how can you not? And it's like stepping into a lung, a breathing, dusty, ink-smelling lung, filled with the entire past of a civilization that nearly died. Shelves grown with scrolls, boxes filled with brittle wax tablets, ink bottles labeled in 5 languages. You meet scholars debating whether to preserve old laws or purge them. Priests arguing the correct Latin word for loaf. And one sleep-deprived monk who's memorized entire speeches from Cicero just in case the scrolls burn again. Quirky tidbit. After the crises of 536-550, there was a quiet explosion in archival efforts across the empire. Some scholars believe it was a subconscious reaction to catastrophe, an urge to preserve knowledge against the next wave of darkness. Several monasteries even began stockpiling double copies of texts, storing them in separate locations. Early Byzantine data backups, basically. You're offered a position, not high, not flashy, but steady. You take it. Your job? Copy existing works into new scripts. Help retranslate documents that were damaged or burned. Log the movement of imperial messengers. Sometimes, when no one's looking, you add a footnote to a scroll. Nothing big. Just a comment like, "The grain listed here came from Cappadocia in the same week the snow turned black," or "War resumed in Italy. The stars were strangely bright last night." Like they knew. Historical debate moment. Some historians still argue whether the post-catastrophe empire was truly resilient, or if it merely staggered forward on old momentum. Was Justinian's success a sign of rebirth, or the last gasp of a dying Rome in disguise? You see both arguments unfold around you. The empire functions, but only barely. Floods in the Balkans derail road construction. An earthquake near Antioch kills thousands. Famine still haunts Egypt, but people try. You try, and maybe that's what matters. One evening, Thistle shows up at the scriptorium with a piece of tile stuck to her forehead. You blink. I tripped into a wall, she says. Shut up. You grin. She hands you a coin, newly minted. On one side, the Emperor, stylized and stiff. On the other, a cross, plain and defiant. They're calling it the Follies of Recovery. She says, it's nonsense, but nice nonsense. You press the coin into your palm. It's warm, for once. Not because of fire, because it's summer, actual summer. Sun in the sky, no ash, no eclipse. You step outside the scriptorium and look up, and the sky, it's blue. You're still staring at that blue sky when someone behind you mutters. Don't get used to it. You turn. It's an old soldier, wrapped in faded armor and a tunic that's seen too many campaigns. His eyes are like rusted iron, tired but sharp. Rome's fallen 6 times this decade. He grunts, but everyone's pretending we're winning. You offer a polite shrug. We rebuilt. He snorts. You painted over it. Then he limps away, muttering something about mules and emperors. It's 550 AD now, and you're starting to realize something. Survival has a rhythm. It's not about rebuilding one glorious empire overnight. It's about knowing which stones to stack first, which truths to ignore for a while, which lies are too lovely to give up. You rise early each day, ink your quill, and copy. Sometimes it's tax codes. Sometimes it's treaties. Occasionally, it's poetry so old that half the words don't exist anymore. But one day, you get handed a scroll wrapped in red silk. Personal, the librarian whispers. From the palace, you break the seal. Inside is a speech. Long, flowery, and completely ridiculous. It praises Justinian's latest campaign in Spain, calls him the eternal son of the East, and refers to the Western Goths as mice chewing on the hem of history. You blink, you snort, you laugh, and then, carefully, you write every word. Outside, the empire lurches on. Justinian's army stretches thin. In Italy, Rome has changed hands again. The city is a husk, barely alive. The forum is a field. The aqueducts, cracked. Senators now beg beside their statues. But back home, Constantinople is glowing, literally. Justinian pours money into public works, new fountains, new forums, new mosaics, gleaming with gold. There's a choir in Hagia Sophia that sings like thunder in a jar. You attend a performance. You don't believe in miracles. But the echo alone makes your ribs tremble like a drum. You weep without knowing why. Mainstream historical moment. In 551, a new code of law, the Novellae Constitutiones, is issued. It's supposed to update and complete the old Justinian code. You help transcribe parts of it. You don't understand half of it, and neither do most people. But it gives the illusion of order. That's enough. One night, A boy from the palace appears at the scriptorium. He's maybe 10. His sandals are too big. He says nothing, just hands you a scroll and waits. You open it. It's a list of philosophers, names, titles, notes in the margins, like exiled, deceased, or possibly heretical. You look up. The boy shrugs. The Empress wants a catalog. You nod. And for the next week, you dive into dusty corners, copying the thoughts of men who hadn't been spoken of since before the plague. Some were pagans, some Christian, some simply human. You find a line you like. We are all books, with blood for ink. You don't copy that one. You keep it for yourself. Quirky tidbit. The Empress, Theodora, once a circus performer, now one of the most powerful women in the world, was notorious for her intelligence, cunning, and devotion to controlling knowledge. Rumors swirled that she personally read every text banned in the Empire. Some even say she edited some. Secretly, you don't know if that's true, but one morning, a scroll disappears from your desk, and in its place is a tiny note. The ink was excellent. T. Spring returns. Real spring. Rain without ash. Crops without blight. You walk past the bakery and see children laughing. It stuns you. Laughter has become a foreign language. It's like overhearing birds discuss philosophy. You sit nearby just to listen. Then Thistle appears, munching a honey cake. You're getting sentimental, she says, through a mouthful. Guilty, you admit. You know what they say. Sentiment is just mold in a prettier robe. You grin, but you know she's wrong. Sentiment, right now, is the mortar between broken stones. Then something strange happens. A caravan from the east arrives in the city. Large, lavish, silk draped over everything, like color itself had finally remembered Constantinople existed. You watch them unload crates that smell like spices and stars. But the real secret, cocoons, tiny, silvery, whisper-soft silk cocoons, smuggled, because for centuries, the Chinese had guarded the secret of silk, like dragons guard gold. But now Byzantium has the seed. Mainstream historical moment. According to legend and some scholars, 2 Nestorian monks returned from China around 552 with silkworm eggs hidden inside bamboo walking sticks. This act single-handedly shattered China's silk monopoly and birthed a Byzantine silk industry. You're there when the first hatchlings arrive. Tiny, ugly, hungry. You stare, fascinated, as they chew mulberry leaves like miniature gods of thread. A priest nearby whispers, "We will clothe empires with this." You think we might, but not everything is golden. There are still earthquakes. One cracks a cistern and floods an entire district. The plague flares up again, briefly, like a candle gasping before going out. People panic, lock doors, burn herbs, recite prayers backwards. You get sick, not plague, just a fever, but strong enough That thistle forces you to lie down, feeds you soup, while threatening to kick you if you die. You don't. You recover. You write. Historical debate moment. Scholars still argue. Was the empire truly rebounding in the 550s? Or were they buying time with gold, blood, and borrowed glory? Some say Justinian's conquests bankrupted Byzantium for a century. Others claim they saved it from disintegration. You stop caring about the arguments. You care that the sky is blue again. You care that children laugh. You care that the silkworms are alive. You care that Thistle stole a honey cake for you. One day, you walk into the scriptorium and find a scroll addressed to you. No seal, just your name. Inside, history remembers empires, but it's people who remember warmth, bread, songs. You're writing warmth. Keep going. No signature, but you know who sent it. You tuck it inside your tunic and walk outside. The city hums around you. Still broken, still weird, still alive. And overhead, the sky is still blue. You whisper to no one in particular. We made it. And for the first time in years, you believe it. It's 555 AD now. And you find yourself doing something you haven't done in a very long time. Whistling, not a hymn, not a military tune, just some lazy, rambling melody that wanders like a goat on a hillside. You're standing in line at the bathhouse. Yes, they're open again, and someone behind you even joins in. Off key, sure, but it's music. And music means hope is no longer a rumor. You've got ink under your fingernails again. And that's good. It means the scriptorium is busy. Requests keep pouring in. Please find a Greek translation of Hippocrates. We need 200 copies of Justinian's military proclamations. The Empress requests a poetic commentary on the colors of silk. That last one is probably your favorite. You get to describe purples that look like dusk weeping into the sea, yellows that hum like bees inside a lemon blossom. You have no idea if your metaphors make sense, but the court poet sends you a note. Syrupy. Weird. I love it. Mainstream moment. The empire is officially producing its own silk. Spinning, weaving, dyeing. Byzantine silk is now a royal affair. A monopoly, of course. Run like a temple. Guarded like treasure. You get invited to see the looms. They're thunderous. Threads dance like sunlight, trapped in spider webs. The dyes are violent. Crimson so red, it feels illegal. A deep imperial purple, so rich, it almost makes you cry. Someone tells you, the recipe is a state secret. If you whisper it in your sleep, they say, they'll sew your lips shut with gold thread. You chuckle, then pause. You're not entirely sure they're joking. But amid all this color, there's a new kind of whisper. A strange, new word. Avars. At first, you think it's a spice. Then, you find out they're horsemen. Nomadic. Fast. Dangerous. They ride like wind with a grudge. The Balkans feel them first. Raids that vanish as quickly as they come. But they don't just take food or silver. They want tribute. land, leverage. You copy letters back and forth between generals. Most contain some variation of, "What the hell are these people?" No one knows. And that's what makes them terrifying. Then there's Persia, still there, still mad. Justinian's diplomacy is holding, for now. But it's like trying to keep a lion calm with a bowl of olives. You transcribe one particularly tense letter from a Persian envoy. It's so polite, so florid, and so cold that you have to wear a cloak just reading it. Thistle reads over your shoulder and mutters, "That's not a peace offer. That's a threat in a silk glove." You both nod. You make a copy, then burn the original. Standard protocol now. Quirky historical tidbit. In the 550s, the Byzantine Empire was the first in Europe to not only import silkworms, but to industrialize their cultivation. Monasteries sometimes ran silk farms. A few monks even trained in worm husbandry, which is a real job that sounds made up. You visit one. It smells weird. The head monk shows you a worm wrapped in mulberry leaves and says with full sincerity, "He's the emperor's true heir." You nod politely, slowly back away. In the capital, life becomes something else. Ceremonial. There's a new etiquette manual in circulation. One of Justinian's advisors wants to standardize bowing. Kneel at a 43-degree angle. Look left. Do not speak unless addressed by someone wearing red sandals. You laugh so hard, you almost get fired. Thistle rewrites it as a satire, includes a dance, and performs it at a tavern. It goes viral in the 6th century sense, meaning it gets you both summoned to a palace corridor and scolded by someone with gold eyebrows. You apologize, they smile, and let it go. Maybe they needed the laugh too. Historical debate moment. Some historians argue Justinian ruled with ironclad control, micromanaging even the smallest parts of government. Others believe his court was riddled with factionalism, half-truths, and power games. You've seen both. You've copied contradictions, watched one law cancel another, seen people executed one year and praised the next. Truth in Constantinople isn't fixed. It's calligraphed, then rewritten. Meanwhile, the Western campaigns have gone weird. North Africa, mostly stable. Italy, a seesaw. Spain, confusing. You transcribe a battle report with so many place names, you wonder if the general just got lost. There's a moment where one army invades a town they already control, then apologizes and leaves. You underline that part and write. No one replies, but for once, the plague has stopped. Seriously, gone. No new cases. No new piles of lime-soaked corpses. The city smells like bread again, like garlic, like sea wind. You walk down to the harbor, lean on a salt-crusted post, watch ships from Egypt, Africa, Italy, and even India drift in like floating bazaars. And for the first time in a decade, you breathe deep. You whisper to no one, "We survived," then correct yourself. We're surviving You still write each day, still ink your fingers, still sharpen your quill against the edge of hope. But now, people stop by your desk to chat, not to panic, not to weep, just chat about the weather, the price of barley, the rumors that Thistle is dating a silkworm handler. You smirk, say nothing, and write on. One night, as the candles burn low, you find a note tucked under your ink pot. Just a line. You don't have to be famous to save the world. You just have to keep writing it down. You fold it, tuck it in your satchel, and go home, humming again. You wake to thunder, but it's not thunder, it's drums, not of war, but of ritual. You blink, sit up, and remember. It's the festival of the Phoenix. It's a new one. Invented, actually. No roots in scripture or ancient rite. Just a reason, made up by someone too tired to mourn anymore, for the city to finally celebrate the fact that it still exists. And you know what? You love it. The main square is wrapped in crimson banners and cheap gold thread. Kids run through smoke made from burning lemon peels, waving wooden phoenix birds mounted on sticks. Someone dressed as a volcano juggles pineapples badly. Monks walk around, solemnly blessing baskets of raisins. No one knows why. You spot Thistle halfway up a marble column, yelling, "I am reborn," while a goat chews the hem of their tunic. It's perfect. You've spent 2 decades now watching the world buckle and blister and somehow hold together. So you let go for the day. You eat candied walnuts. You lose a shoe. You help light floating lanterns shaped like sun discs and send them down the river with a whispered hope. Yours? Let the next century be boring. But you know the world doesn't work that way. The emperor is aging. Justinian's once golden voice now cracks when he speaks too long. Rumors swirl. Some say he hasn't left the palace in a month. Others whisper he's immortal. You know better. Even emperors fade. You're now one of the older scribes. Younger ones call you the Quiet Quill. One even asks if you're the scribe from the time of the darkness. You say yes. Then you show them your old pages. The ones stained with sweat and salt, crammed edge to edge with words written in a rush to stop the world from unraveling. They read it like scripture. You feel old and dangerous. You like it. Mainstream historical fact. In 558 AD, one of Constantinople's most iconic churches, the Hagia Sophia, partially collapsed. Its mighty dome, meant to kiss the heavens, came tumbling down during an earthquake. Justinian, aging but still emperor, ordered an immediate rebuild. A better one. The dome will rise again. You're called to record the rebuilding plans. Architects argue over angles. One claims too much light made the dome proud. Another says it was the choir's fault. Too many voices disrupt the mortar. You suppress a laugh. In your notes, you simply write, "Fell will rise," and that becomes your unofficial motto for the decade. Quirky tidbit. There's a man near the port who swears he can read the future by sniffing boiling cabbage. His name is Focus, and people call him the Prophet of Stew. Every Tuesday, a line forms outside his hut. You visit out of curiosity, He lets you smell the pot. It smells like soup. He nods solemnly and says, "Your path is paved with quiet ink, but beware the eel." You never do figure out what that means, but to this day, you flinch at seafood. In your quieter moments, you find yourself dreaming of the West again, of Ravenna, of Rome. You remember letters from soldiers years ago, describing the once glorious cities turned to rubble and ghosts. Now, new reports come through. People returning, monks restoring mosaics, bakers opening shop. One message says, "There is laughter in Ravenna." You read it 3 times, then again aloud. You can almost hear it, but not everyone is cheering. Taxes rise. Always. Wars never end. They just get new uniforms. Soldiers parade through the streets with medals and empty stomachs. One stops by your bench and asks, "How much does a poem pay?" You offer him half your bread. He takes it, eats, then thanks you in Latin so old it sounds like a hymn. You write that moment down. It becomes your favorite entry that week. Historical debate moment. Some scholars say the worst was over by the 560s, that the air cleared, the crops recovered, and humanity bounced back. Others argue that trauma lingers, that the scars from 536 and all that followed never really faded. You sit in your window one dusky evening, watching smoke from ovens coil into the sky, and wonder if healing ever feels like anything but silence. One night, you visit the river. The phoenix lanterns are gone now, but their ashes still cling to the reeds. You dip your hand into the water. It's cool. It runs forward. So do you. You're summoned to the palace again. An old scroll has been found in the archives, brittle with age and damp with time. They need someone who remembers the old ways, someone who lived through the smoke years, someone who knows which squiggle means starvation and which one means hope. You smile and take the job. You read the scroll under glass. It's one of yours, a copy made in 538. Smudged, cracked, but still legible. It talks of darkness, of the sun's betrayal, of holding the line with nothing but parchment and grit. At the bottom, in hurried script, your own youthful hand had written, "We are not gods, but we endure." You step outside. The sky is cloudy, but not dark. Not anymore. And for now, that's enough. You wake before the sun rises, not because you want to, but because your bones now have their own alarms. You stretch slowly, and every joint answers with a little complaint. Fair enough. You've lived through 3 decades of what most people today call the bad years. You just call it life. Down in the streets, Constantinople is exhaling. You feel it in the bustle, the soft murmur of bakers lighting fires, scribes dragging pens, mothers brushing dust off their children's tunics. Things are still hard, but they no longer feel fragile. And that's something you never thought you'd get to say out loud. Today, you have a letter to write. Not a regular one, a real one. One bound for Antioch, or Alexandria, or maybe even the dreamy merchant hub, all the way in Francia. And this time, it isn't about plague counts, or famine reports, or urgent military provisioning, stamped with urgency and despair. This one's about books. Turns out, someone wants your help reconstructing lost stories, fables that didn't survive the ash clouds, poems swallowed by mold, treatises eaten by mice, with a taste for rhetoric. You're flattered and slightly alarmed, but mostly flattered. You sit down, dip your pen in ink, and begin. To the scholars of the Western provinces, greetings from a humble survivor. The words flow more easily than you expected. Mainstream historical fact. By the late 560s, the Byzantine Empire was rebuilding its cultural memory. Monasteries across the Mediterranean were copying and distributing texts, rebuilding libraries, and restoring education lost in the mid-6th century chaos. Justinian's rule, though marred by plague and economic strain, did usher in a late revival of Roman intellectual life. It was quiet and patchy, but it mattered. You head to the scriptorium later that day and find the place buzzing. Not from fear, not even from pressure, from hope. New scribes, kids, really, debate the best Greek word for resilience. One swears by carteria, another argues for hypomone. You grin and offer a third option. Just write both. Let the future figure it out. They laugh like birds startled from a fountain. That laugh sticks with you all day. Down at the docks, a Syrian trader offers dried citrus and tales of villages rebuilding near the Dead Sea. Salt's coming back, he says, tapping his temple. Where salt flows, peace follows. You don't know if that's a proverb or marketing. Either way, you buy 2 bags. You pass a market square, now full of smells that used to be rare. Pepper, clove, something that might be fermented onion. A child nearby eats a cake so sweet, they burst into tears and shout, "It hurts!" But I love it. You feel the same way about poetry, honestly. But not everything is rebirth and roses. There's tension too. A sharp little undercurrent in political meetings and tax rows. Some say the empires stretched too thin. Too many wars on too many fronts. Others whisper that Rome's old bones can't hold this many dreams anymore. And every time the word Persia is spoken, the air in the room tightens. You watch 2 generals argue about border fortresses over fig cakes. You quietly excuse yourself. Quirky tidbit. A young monk insists he's uncovered the true cause of the 536 sun darkening. Sky whales. Yes, really, invisible sky whales whose massive bodies occasionally pass between the earth and sun, plunging us into darkness. You ask what they eat. He answers, deadpan, fear and loose theology. He's since been reassigned to wine labeling duty. You hear the city plans to install street lamps in the richer districts, not oil ones, but polished bronze reflectors, set high on arches to catch the last light of sunset and spread it farther into the night. A dream born of the years when darkness felt endless. Someone scribbled in chalk beneath one of the lampposts. So we never forget. You write that one down too. In the forum, an old man tells jokes in exchange for bread. He's sharp, even if his tunic's half moth. He points at the sky and says, "Back in my day, we called that not lethal." You laugh. You give him your lunch. He calls you a poet and bows like a drunk diplomat. Historical debate moment. Historians still argue whether the cultural regrowth of the late 6th century was a true recovery or just a slow crawl from collapse. Was Justinian a visionary ruler stabilizing the world, or a war-hungry egotist bleeding the provinces dry? You've read too many records to pretend there's a clean answer. People are messy, so are emperors. The letter you began that morning finally finishes itself. Just after dusk, it ends. We lost so much, but not everything. Some of us stayed behind and remembered on purpose. You don't have to thank us. Just write more stories. You seal it with wax and an old coin. Then you walk to the lantern bridge, lean over, and watch the water below, glowing with reflections, dancing like 1,000 little fires. Somewhere behind you, someone sings off-key. You close your eyes and hum along. You don't even flinch when the earth moves anymore. It's subtle this time. Just a breath beneath your feet, like a cat stretching in its sleep. The younger ones pause, eyes wide. The baker clutches his oven. A mother snatches up her toddler mid-step. But you just sip your barley tea and wait. It passes. Only a ripple, you murmur. It's not bravado. It's just muscle memory. When you've outlasted volcanoes, plagues, war, and winters that feel like the sky itself turned against you. A trembling cobblestone isn't enough to raise your pulse. The year is 573. Byzantium's old wounds are now puckered scars, toughened by time and fire. You walk through city gates, rebuilt with ash mortar, inscribed with verses no one's dared carve in decades. One inscription catches your eye today. He who remembers nothing risks everything. It's not scripture, it's just graffiti. But it's been gilded. Even the vandals are philosophers now. Today you've been summoned, not as a scribe or even as a witness, but as a consultant. Sounds fancy. Really just means you've survived longer than most. So come tell us what you know. You shuffle into the hall, parchment tucked under your arm, and nod politely at the robed men debating disaster protocols like they invented resilience. Their newest obsession? Earthquakes. Specifically, the big one. Mainstream historical fact. The earthquake of Euphrates Valley, 573 CE, devastates regions of modern-day Syria and Turkey. It topples cities still reeling from decades of plague, war, and famine. One city, Antioch, is hit particularly hard. Survivors describe stone raining from the sky as buildings crumbled like brittle bread crust. It's another cruel reminder that nature doesn't wait for humanity to catch its breath. You're handed a scroll with a map. Red circles for cities, black slashes for fault lines. You trace your finger over fault ridges, like they're old enemies you've sparred with. You lived through the plague of Justinian, yes? One noble asks. You nod. Lived through is generous. I mostly outweighed it. Polite chuckles. The kind people make when they don't know if you're joking. You tell them this. Earthquakes aren't like famine. They don't give you time to fear them. They scribble that down like it's wisdom. You let them. Quirky tidbit. A rumor's been spreading among the peasants that earthquakes are caused by giant worms writhing deep beneath the soil, angry at how many dead humans they've had to process these past decades. You laugh when you hear it, then you pause. Honestly, it's no more absurd than invisible sky whales. You've heard worse explanations from bishops back in your home district. The aftershock has cracked your neighbor's latrine. Again, she's furious. You offer to patch it with old roofing tile and quicklime. She offers you half a walnut cake and a toothless smile. That's the deal these days. Cake for cement, kindness for competence. The bartering system of trauma survivors. You pass a ruined bathhouse. Its columns still split from the tremors 5 years ago. Children now play between the pillars, their laughter bouncing like coins, dropped in an empty cistern. You smile. It's strange how joy creeps in through the cracks. Literally. By late afternoon, you visit the archives. The restoration project's grown bigger than you imagined. Monks from Armenia, Nubia, and even Visigothic Gaul have arrived, copying texts, retranslating scrolls, re-inking diagrams, lost to mildew and mouse nibbles. Today, they're debating whether to rewrite Herodotus to reflect new moral priorities. You roll your eyes. Just footnote it, you mutter. Future generations deserve our contradictions. Historical debate moment. Historians still argue whether Antioch ever fully recovered from the cumulative disasters of this century. Some call it a permanently diminished city. Others claim its resilience is underappreciated, highlighting art, trade, and learning that continued despite physical destruction. You've seen both sides. Antioch, like you, walks with a limp, but it walks. You spend the evening with a friend, an old general who gave up war for gardening. His backyard smells of time and wisdom. We're not rebuilding the empire, he says. We're composting it, turning all that rot into new soil. You toast him with watered wine. To compost, he grins, and to worms, angry or not. Later that night, you lie awake, listening to the earth groan faintly beneath you. Not threatening, just reminding. You press your palm to the floor and whisper, I'm still here. No one answers. That's fine. The silence is no longer empty. It's earned. The moon tonight is a thin sickle, sharp as a whisper, slicing across the sky in silence. You're out walking again, not because you have to, but because the streets no longer frighten you. Not the dark ones, not the cracked ones, not even the ones that used to be graves. You've grown used to the night breathing, It exhales through ruined temples and hollow aqueducts, through caved-in bathhouses and tangled prayer flags, flapping in slow patterns against the breeze. Some people say it's the ghosts of 536 still trying to find their way home. You smile at that. Maybe it's just the sound of humans learning to live again. It's the year 582, if you're keeping count. That's 46 years since the sun disappeared, since the veil fell over the earth, and the world decided to try and end itself, one domino at a time. But now it feels like something else has shifted, not just in the world, but in people. You pass by a tiny tavern whose door used to be permanently boarded. It's open tonight, and there's music, honest-to-goodness laughter, echoing like it hasn't in decades. You stop in your tracks, listen for a moment. A girl sings something about figs and foolish kings. She can't be more than 12, and she doesn't know what it's like to choke on volcanic dust or bury siblings after a summer snow. She doesn't even know why the song is funny, but that's the point, isn't it? Mainstream historical fact. By 582 CE, the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, is consolidating again. Justin the Set has given way to Tiberius II Constantine, who rules with unexpected moderation. Rebuilding efforts accelerate. Grain trade resumes. Some of the worst scars of the long dusk begin to heal. It's not utopia, but it is motion. You help a potter stack his kiln, half ritual, half work. His hands are knotted like twisted rope, but his clay is smoother than any you've seen in years. He tells you he's finally gotten red ochre again. First shipment from beyond the old desert trade routes. Colors coming back, he says. It feels symbolic. You don't tell him the pigment came from iron oxide. You just nod. About time. Quirky tidbit. A group of monks has started bottling sunlight. No, really. They've created tiny flasks of golden-colored liquid, distilled from herbs, saffron, and honey, then blessed ceremonially under cloudless skies. They sell them as sun relics. People keep them on mantles. Some say they glow faintly in the dark. You bought one. You keep it in your satchel, just in case the skies turn gray again. Superstition? Maybe. You call it insurance. By midday, you help carry thatched bundles to a newly rebuilt orphanage on the river bend. It's painted blue, soft, absurdly bright blue. Not Roman blue, not imperial, just joyfully childlike, as if someone melted the sky and brushed it onto plaster. Children inside scream and laugh and argue about who gets the dry loaf. One boy, maybe 6, swears he's descended from a sun god. Bet you don't even have a chariot, you mutter. He blinks. Uyet, he says. You salute him. He salutes back. You wander the marketplace next, weaving through stalls that smell of garlic, citrus, and just a hint of the sea. A woman sells small wooden tokens, carved with symbols of renewal. Wheat stalks, sunbursts, even phoenixes. The myth of rebirth is fashionable again. Can I interest you in a phoenix? She asks. You hold one in your palm. It's light, lopsided. Does it work? You ask. She shrugs. Did you die? You raise an eyebrow. Then I guess it did. You buy 3. Historical debate moment. Historians still argue whether the final decades of the 6th century marked a true recovery from the disasters of 536-560s, or merely a reprieve before further decline. Some label this period a false spring. Others argue it was a genuine cultural resilience, proof that societies could adapt, not just endure. You don't argue either side. You've walked too many streets that were both cemetery and festival ground. You know, truth can hold two hands at once. Evening now. You visit a hill where you once watched a city burn. It's green again. There's barley growing there. And a little shrine made from stacked stones and rusted armor. Someone's hung a bell from the handle of an old sword. It rings softly in the breeze. You sit beside it, alone. You remember the smell of ash, the silence of too many mouths, closed forever. The impossible weight of year after year of disaster, grinding down your bones like millstones. And then the girl's song drifts up from the tavern again, carried on the wind. Figs and foolish kings. You lean back, and for the first time in decades, you don't feel haunted. You just feel full. You're lying on your back in a field that didn't exist a few years ago, just outside the edge of the village, where charred earth once stretched to the horizon. Now, soft wheat brushes your elbows. The stalks hiss gently as they sway in the evening wind, as if they're whispering secrets between each other. You let them talk. You close your eyes. You breathe in deeply. And the air, finally, doesn't smell like death, or damp mildew, or rot. It smells like warm hay, distant cooking fires, and something sweet. Honey, maybe, or figs left out in the sun. You're still here. It's 590 CE, 54 years since the world broke, and you've lived every one of them. You were just a child when the sun dimmed, when the sky turned gray, and the stars went missing for months at a time. You grew up in shadow. You lost people. You made peace with cold summers, starving winters, plagues that had no name, and cities that crumbled into themselves. You learned not to ask too much of the world, and yet the world kept offering little things. A mushroom in the forest, a warm stone, a stranger's fire, a silent night, a story shared under a cracked dome where a library once stood. And now, look at you, older, weathered, still breathing. Mainstream historical fact. In 590, the Western world begins to pivot. Pope Gregory Gregory the Great, is elected in Rome. His reforms and writings will reshape the future of the Catholic Church and lay foundations for the medieval Christian world. He writes about suffering, about endurance, about the meaning of affliction. His words echo in dusty halls and candle-lit monasteries. In some places, they even feel like hope. You visit a friend today, the old woman with the perfect memory. She's spinning thread from flax and humming a melody you swear is older than time. She doesn't look up when you enter, just pats the stool beside her. Remember, she says, when the sheep walked straight into the village because they thought we were dead. You chuckle. You try to make a coat from one. She raises an eyebrow. I succeeded. Thank you. You both laugh until your stomachs ache. Do you think it's over? You ask her finally. She doesn't answer for a while. Instead, she ties off the end of her thread, sets her spindle down, and turns to you. No, she says, but I think we're not over. And that, you realize, is probably more important. Quirky tidbit. Some villages in Gaul and Iberia now hold annual sun feasts, festivals where people light bonfires, burn effigies of the old gray clouds, and make offerings of flowers and honey. One tradition includes roasting turnips shaped like faces, carved with laughter, not fear. Children compete for the best sun dance, a ritual invented just 5 years ago, but now treated as sacred. You went to one last summer. You danced. You were awful. A kid gave you a flower crown anyway. You still have it, dried and crumbling, tied to your satchel like a medal. People talk about the sky differently now. They still flinch a little when clouds gather thick and fast. But they wait, they watch, and when the sky clears again, there's cheering, not huge parades, not epic poems, just quiet joy, clapping. Maybe someone hands out pickled eggs. You like it better this way. Historical debate moment. Scholars today still argue whether the late antique Little Ice Age ended by 590, or if global cooling persisted for another century. Tree rings from Siberia say one thing, ice cores from Greenland say another. Some say 590 marked a genuine turning point. Others argue it was just a lull in a longer age of cold. But for you, the sun feels warm again on your face. You don't need charts. You just need this moment. There's a kid at the edge of town who draws suns on everything. Walls, carts, goats. He's obsessed. You asked him once why. He said, if the sun forgets us again, it can follow the pictures back. You promised to help him draw more. Now, lying in this field, you let your hand trail through the grain. It's still unbelievable how much you lost, how much came back, how much didn't, and yet you survived anyway. You think about the monks bottling sunlight, the volcanic summer snow, the day the stars reappeared, the plague ships burning on the horizon, the pigs that ran wild in the forum, the first child who was born after it all, with eyes like pale fire, the sounds of a city breathing again. You think of all of it, not with fear, but with presence. You were there. You're still here. You made it, not just through tonight's story, but through something far heavier. 536 wasn't a footnote. It wasn't a quirky fact on a quiz show, or the backdrop of a dusty textbook. It was an unraveling of the world. A moment where the planets seemed to ask, can you hold on just a little longer? And humanity answered, we'll try. That's the thing about us. We're soft, squishy creatures with no claws or armor. And yet, we outlasted a year without sun, crop failures, volcanic winters, and plagues that stole entire languages from the earth. We outlived the dark, and so did you. Even now, as you lie there, maybe not in a medieval field, but under your own blanket, fan humming softly, shadows dancing across your ceiling, you carry that same resilience, that quiet, stubborn light. Tonight, you drifted through a broken century and came out the other side. You saw what fear looks like up close. And you saw how people met it. With songs, with stories, with turnip soup, and bad dancing, and sun-shaped graffiti. You saw a world go dark, and then slowly learn to see again. So sleep now. The worst year in history is behind you, and the sun will rise tomorrow. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.